is no other generation. The generation of children being raised today are gone. They are gone. We are the last generation to capture them. If we don't capture them, they are gone. Gone. So what is the real man? Proverbs 31 tells you about a real woman. Job 29 tells you about a real man. Real men are men. They are men who initiate the leadership responsibility at home and in the culture of applying truth to the situations of life. I want to look at a couple of concepts, three in particular. First of all, the character of a real man, the goal of a real man, and then the process of reclaiming your manhood. First of all, a real man has divine continuity with the past. Job says, oh, verse 2, that I were in the months gone by, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me. He can look back over his shoulder and see divine movement of God in his past. Yes. The man has a divine heritage. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere we lost that divine heritage. You know how it was? It was passed down from generation to generations. Some things you didn't do simply because God said so. Remember how your grandmother used to talk like that? She was passing down a divine heritage. But somewhere between my grandmother's generation and my generation, we lost that divine continuity of history. Yeah. And no longer does God sit in control over what happens in our community. Now today, our children don't know anything about God and certainly don't know anything about church. And the reason they don't go and they don't know is because dad doesn't know anything. Dad sends them to church. Dad tells the wife, hurry home and cook his dinner. Dad's snoring. Nowhere to be found. No divine continuity. But Job could look back. Let me tell you what kind of dad Job was. Let me just read it to you from Job 1. Hold your finger in Job 29. Let me read you Job 1, verse 5. And it came about when the days of feasting had completed their cycle, that Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning, offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. He got up early in the morning and got on his knees for his family. He got up early in the morning and said, Lord, the man had 10 kids. I mean, with 10 kids, he could have argued, I'm too busy and I'm too tired to pray. The man got up early because he understood the role of the father is to be the priest of the home. And he had some continuity in history. But our kids don't have dads that do that. They don't have dads that wake them up and say, okay, wife, okay, children, it's time for us as a family to go to church. If the husband does go, it's because the wife and kids dog him, not because they take leadership. And so there is no divine continuity being passed, no history. Secondly, a man is committed to raising his children. End of verse 5 says, and my children were around me. He wasn't just coming home after the kids went to bed. He wasn't just coming home all late so that he had to rush through and hurry up and get them out of his hair. He let his kids surround him, all 10 of them. Let me tell you something about having babies. The Bible says the more of them, the merrier. Now, that's not how we think. We think the more of them, the poorer I get, and the more they're in my way, and the more they get on my nerves. That is not biblical thought. In the Bible, plenty of kids. The Bible says, blessed is the man whom the Lord giveth children and whose quiver is what? Full of them. Because the Bible says there is reward, great reward, for multiplicity of children. Totally different than the selfish worldview we have today. I've got to have my 2 Cadillacs, can't afford kids. Got to have my house in the suburbs, can't afford kids. Got to have my Avante suits, can't afford kids. That is a pagan, sissy way of thinking. A real man earns respect. A real man doesn't go around saying, respect me. A real man carries himself in such a way you got to respect it. Real man carries himself in such a way that there is no choice. Look at Job, verse 7. When I went out to the gate of the city, that's downtown. When I went to work, when I went downtown. When I took my seat in the square, that's like the city council. The young men saw me and hid themselves. Come on now. Job came in and sat down, and the young men said, we got to go, Mr. Job is here. Is that the way our young men do today? Tough. Get nothing by no Mr. Job. Mr. Job not my daddy. Mr. Job don't tell me what to do. In fact, I ain't even gonna call him Mr. I'm gonna call him Job. No respect for the elderly, no respect for older men. The Bible says when you run into an older man, Timothy talking to a pastor, he says even though you're the pastor of the church, when you run into an older man, you treat him like a daddy. When you run into an older woman, you treat her like a mother. Now they'll blow them away because they're helpless. Because they hadn't learned to respect dad at home. So you know they're not going to respect another older man in the street. Says the young man, when I showed up, hid themselves. But the old men rose and stood. The old men said, Mr. Job, we're sure glad you're here. Because he carried himself in such a way that even though he was younger than the older men could look up. And that's what Paul tells Timothy. Let no man despise your youth. Carry yourself in such a way that older men stand up. But you treat them like dad. When you walk in the room and the princes, those young men are cussing and fussing and using all kind of perverted language and talking about women and running down the dignity of women, and you walk in the room, they supposed to say, can't talk that way, Rev just showed up. And you don't have to be in a ministry either. When you show up, they ought to know you don't use that kind of language around here. But how can they stop talking when they've heard you use that language? They've heard you make jokes about women and call your wife an old lady rather than talking about the dignity of a woman and rather than using language that is befitting a man of God. The princesses stopped talking when Job showed up because a new standard had entered the room. But he was also a man of mercy, verse 12, because I have delivered the poor who cried for help and the orphan who had no helper. The blessing of the one ready to perish came upon me, and I made the widow's heart sing for joy. A man of compassion. A man of compassion. Job was rich. But it says when rich Job came in, and they weren't intimidated, oh, I can't hang around, I'm a poor widow. It says when Job showed up, the rich noble shut up, but the widow's heart shouted for joy. The widows, the poor folks saw Job coming and said, yes, our champion, because he cares. Real men hurt for others. Real men are involved in the community, making a difference for the have-nots of this world. A real man is a man of justice, verse 14. I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was father to the needy, and I investigated the case which I did not know. Justice. You don't intimidate a real man to flow with the crowd, because wrong is wrong. Yes. For a real man, wrong is wrong. It says Job was a man of justice, and he investigated the case to find out what the truth was. He wasn't all emotional, just calling certain stuff racism and other stuff economic justice and other stuff this and other stuff that. He says, now give me the facts. A real man wants the truth. He doesn't paint it black, white, purple, yellow, or polka dot. He wants to know, what's the truth here? He's not intimidated by rich men or small men. He wants to know, I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Now let's get justice here. He doesn't play political games. He doesn't play all of the politics of this age. The real man deals with the truth. Deals with the truth. But sissified men want to be popular. See, that's why they join gangs. That's why you have gangs. They have gangs because they're weak and they're thimble thin. And so what they do is they harness this love and attention that they didn't get at home in gangs. See, all gangs are alternative families. That's all gangs are. They're new places to get self-esteem. They're new places to get dignity. They're new places to climb up a ladder of recognition. That's all gangs are. They're new families, and they play on this. Are they concerned about justice? No. They're concerned about injustice because dad wasn't home to teach them right and wrong. And that is dad's job. Also, he's a man of stability, verse 18. Then I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root is spread out to the waters, and dew lies all night on my branch. He says, I'm going to die right here. Got to talk about my dad right now. I love my dad. Getting older now, but I love my dad. One day, he sat Lois and I down at the kitchen table and told us about life. Told us how tough it was to bring us up. How many days there were when there was no money. I didn't know it then. I was poor, but I didn't know it. I was having fun. It was a struggle. My dad's the stevedore, a longshoreman. For 40 years. He went out on that boat and sweated, broke his neck. I never had that kind of emotion well up in me as I was sitting there that day. And he was saying, boy, it was rough. But then he said, but when I see you now. He said, boy, it was rough, but when I see you now. When I see you going on for the Lord, when I see that you're in the ministry, when I see you're loving the Lord Christ, when I see you're trying to instill biblical values in your children, boy, when I see you now, it's worth it. Yeah. He told me when he saw me now, it's worth it. I just sent him a clip from the paper where I got Father of the Year award. I talked to him on the phone and said, boy, I'm proud of you. The neighborhood's gotten bad now. They're selling drugs on the corner now. Can't take my kids home without them seeing some drug deal coming down on the corner. Every year we go home, I say, Dad, I'm really worried about you here. You can't stay here. It's getting too dangerous. He said, boy, my roots are here. He said, it's all I know. I wouldn't know what to do with a nicer house, and I wouldn't know about his old beat up car. He says, I don't know. I said, Dad, why don't you get a new car? He said, boy, I wouldn't know what to do with a new car. I think I'm going to close it out right here. Say, because I've raised my children, I've served my Lord, and I want to spend the rest of my years with my wife. God's taking care of me this far. I ain't going to move. Says my nest is here. He had stability. But oh, look at the families today, so unstable. So unstable. Don't know which way they're going. Have no plan for the future. Live to survive. No stability. Job says a real man is stable. And finally, a real man has wisdom. Verse 21. To me they listened and they waited. They kept silent for my counsel. After my words, they did not speak again. And my speech dropped on them, and they waited for me as for the rain. I was a refreshment to them. And opened their mouth as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they did not believe, and the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose a way for them and set its